Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, let's unpack this. We're setting out today to really understand poverty. It's such a huge challenge, isn't it? So deeply woven into everything, touching lives everywhere, not just numbers, but real people, real struggles.
Right.
So our mission here is to take these sources we have, they're presented as questions and answers, which is quite interesting, and, dig out the real insights. We'll
Mhm.
go from definitions and how it's measured, look at global trends, hear some local stories, and explore the solutions being tried out. This isn't just data, it's about understanding why it matters to you.
And what's fascinating, I think, is how these questions actually guide us. They provide a kind of roadmap for understanding poverty as this complex challenge. It forces you to think critically, step by step, beyond just simple ideas of what poverty is.
Right.
So we'll be covering the causes, what governments are doing, particularly anti-poverty measures, and looking at trends in India and globally, just so everyone knows. We won't be getting into, say, the history of global economic crises today that's outside our scope based on these materials.
Got it. So let's start with that basic idea. When we think poverty, often our minds jump straight to money, or rather, the lack of it.
Usually, yes.
But our sources push back on that narrow view right away. They want us to look deeper. Let's start with a couple of stories that really bring the human side into focus.
Right.
Think about Ram Saran. He's described as a daily wage laborer working near Ranchi in Jharkhand, so urban setting, but his income is totally irregular, day-to-day stuff.
Very precarious.
Yeah, and his wife, Santa Devi, she works as a part-time maid, earning maybe around 1,500 rupees a month.
Yeah,
It paints this picture of just constantly trying to make ends meet, doesn't it?
it really does, that constant uncertainty.
Now contrast that with Laka Singh's family. They're in a village near Meerut in Uttar Pradesh. And the key thing here, they don't own any land at all.
Right, landlessness. That's a critical point.
They rely completely on finding odd jobs, casual labor, just to survive. So these two examples, one urban, one rural, they really drive home a crucial point our sources make.
Which is?
That poverty isn't just about low pay, it's fundamentally about, landlessness, like you said, and unemployment, or at least very insecure employment. It's the lack of consistent, decent work and basic assets.
Absolutely. And if we step back and connect this to how social scientists view it, they completely agree. They emphasize that looking beyond just income and consumption is crucial. Key indicators they point to are things like social exclusion and vulnerability.
Okay, let's break those down. Social exclusion.
Yeah, so social exclusion isn't about choosing to be separate. It's about the poor being systematically, excluded, shut out from facilities, benefits, opportunities that, the better off parts of society take for granted.
So it's systemic barriers.
Exactly. And then there's vulnerability. Vulnerability to poverty. This describes the greater probability, the higher risk that certain groups or individuals face of either becoming poor or just staying poor.
Can you give an example?
The sources mention a physically handicapped person as an example. They inherently face more barriers, fewer opportunities, making them more vulnerable.
Right, that makes sense.
And all this complexity, it naturally leads to a big question. If poverty is this multi-layered thing, how on earth do we measure it properly? How do we capture all these dimensions?
Yeah, how do you put a number on something so, human and complex?
Hmm.
Our sources tell us the core concept used for measurement is the poverty line.
The threshold, basically.
Exactly. And historically in India, getting to that line involved looking at calorie requirements. It's quite fascinating. For rural areas, the figure was set at 2,400 calories per person per day.
Which was higher than urban areas.
Right. Because the assumption was rural folks generally do more physical labor. It shows how context mattered, even in those early calculations.
But, and this is a key takeaway, India's approach has evolved quite a bit since then. We've moved beyond just calories.
Significantly, it seems.
Yes. The government of India, through its policy think tank, NTI Ayog, now uses a much more sophisticated method. It's called the Multidimensional Poverty Index, or MPI.
Multidimensional, okay.
And this MPI uses, get this, 12 developmental indicators. They're grouped under 3 broad dimensions: health, education, and standard of living.
Health, education, standard of living. Got it. And what's not included, just to be clear.
Well, the sources implicitly contract this with things like, say, political stability indicators.
Mm-hmm.
Those aren't part of this specific index for measuring poverty itself.
Okay. Can you give some examples within those 3 dimensions?
Sure. So under health, one key indicator mentioned is maternal health. For education, a household is considered deprived if no member aged 10 or older has completed 6 years of schooling.
6 years. Okay.
And standard of living covers things like access to cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, assets,
Hmm.
those kinds of basic necessities.
It sounds much more holistic than just calories or income.
It definitely is. And to give you some historical context, back in 2005-06, using this multidimensional approach, the estimate was that about 55% of India's population was living in multidimensional poverty.
Wow, 55%. That's more than half the country.
It was a huge number, highlighting the scale of the challenge back then.
So, moving from just calories to this MPI, that feels like a really big shift in thinking, doesn't it? Acknowledging that poverty isn't just about empty stomachs, but about lack of opportunity, poor health, lack of education.
Precisely. It's a much broader understanding of well-being.
So, what has this meant for India's progress? You said 55% back then. What's the picture now?
Well, there's actually some significant good news here. Our sources state that between 2015-16 and 2019-21, the proportion of multidimensional poor in India dropped considerably,
Okay, from what to what?
from about 25% down to 15%.
25 down to 15%. That's a 10 percentage point drop in just a few years. That's quite remarkable.
It is substantial progress, yes. But, and this is important, it's not an even story across the whole country.
Ah, okay. So disparities exist.
Big time. The sources highlight this. For instance, states like Kerala, which has historically focused a lot on human resource development education, health had a headcount ratio, or HCR.
That's the percentage of poor people.
Yes, exactly. Kerala's HCR was below 10% in that 2019-21 period. Very low.
Okay, impressive. But
But on the other end of the spectrum, Bihar, unfortunately, showed the highest HCR among the states presented in our source materials for that same time frame.
so massive regional differences remain a challenge.
A very real challenge. It reminds us the fight against poverty needs tailored approaches, state by state.
Which naturally leads to the question, who are the most vulnerable groups within India? Who's still finding it hardest to escape poverty?
Our sources are quite clear on this. They identify scheduled caste households as one of the social groups most vulnerable.
Okay. Scheduled castes, any others mentioned specifically?
Yes, scheduled tribes as well. The data highlighted is pretty stark. In 2011-12, a staggering 43% of people belonging to scheduled tribes were reported as unable to meet their basic needs.
43%. Wow, that really underscores how certain communities bear a much heavier burden.
It points to those deep-seated inequalities that still need tackling.
Okay, so let's zoom out now. We've looked at India in detail. How does this all fit into the global picture? How do we compare poverty internationally?
Well, for making those international comparisons, the World Bank uses a uniform standard, a global poverty line.
And what is that standard currently?
It's defined as minimum availability of the equivalent of $2.15 per person per day, adjusted for purchasing power parity, of course.
$2.15 a day. Okay,
Yeah.
and what's the trend globally based on that line?
Actually, similar to India's multidimensional progress, the global trend for extreme economic poverty has also been positive.
Oh, good news then.
Yes, definitely encouraging. The proportion of people worldwide living below that $2.15 line fell quite significantly. It went from 16.27% in 2010 down to 9.05% in 2019.
16 down to 9% in about a decade. That's a big drop globally, too.
It is. And our sources point to certain countries making huge strides. China, for example, is often cited for achieving a remarkably low percentage of its population below that $2.15 threshold in recent years.
Yeah.
Massive poverty reduction there.
That's incredible progress, but are there emerging challenges on the global front?
Yes, definitely. One really striking point our sources make is about the geography of extreme poverty. While overall numbers have fallen, poverty is becoming increasingly concentrated.
Concentrated where?
The forecast highlighted is that by 2030, almost 9 out of every 10 people living in extreme poverty worldwide are expected to be in sub-Saharan Africa.
9 out of 10 in sub-Saharan Africa. That's a massive concentration.
It really is. And it signals that global efforts, aid, development strategies they need to become incredibly targeted and perhaps rethink how they approach the unique challenges in that region.
So this really highlights the importance of global goals, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It connects directly to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. The overall aim is ending poverty in all its forms by 2030.
And which specific SDG are we talking about here?
That would be SDG 1, no poverty. Its specific target is quite ambitious. It aims to reduce the proportion of men, women, and children living in poverty in all its dimensions, according to national definitions, by at least half by 2030.
Reduced by half. That's a huge undertaking, especially with the concentration challenge you mentioned.
A monumental task indeed.
Okay, let's bring it back to India for a moment. We've seen the progress and the challenges, but what about the roots? Why did poverty become such a deep issue in India in the first place?
Our sources point to a few critical factors. One major historical reason mentioned is the low level of economic development under the British colonial administration.
The colonial legacy.
Yes, it sort of set the stage, creating structural disadvantages that persisted long after independence.
And it wasn't just a rural problem, right? You mentioned Ram Saran earlier.
Exactly. Poverty became a significant feature of urban India, too, mainly because people migrated from rural areas looking for better opportunities in cities.
But didn't always find them.
Often didn't. They frequently ended up with irregular, low-paying jobs in the informal sector, often living in slums or precarious housing.
And there's another factor mentioned that seems really insidious. Indebtedness.
Ah, yes, debt. The sources describe it as both a cause and an effect of poverty.
A vicious cycle.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Poor households often lack savings, so when emergencies hit, or even just for basic consumption, they have to borrow, often at very high interest rates, especially from informal lenders. This debt trap makes it incredibly difficult to escape poverty.
You can see how that would just keep people stuck. So given these deep roots and complex causes, what is India's strategy now to tackle poverty?
The current anti-poverty strategy, according to our sources, is essentially two-pronged.
Okay, what are the two prongs?
First, promoting economic growth. The idea is that a growing economy creates more opportunities, more jobs, raises incomes overall. And second, implementing targeted anti-poverty programs.
So growth plus direct intervention. Let's talk about those targeted programs. Any specific examples given?
Oh yes, several key ones are highlighted. A major one is MGNREGA, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act from 2005.
Right. MGNREGA. What's its main aim?
It aims to provide at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment in a financial year to every rural household whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual work.
Guaranteed work. And there's something about women's participation, too.
Yes, that's a crucial feature. 1/3 of the proposed jobs under MGNREGA are reserved for women. It's quite significant for empowerment and household security.
That's a huge scheme. What else?
There's PM Poshan, the Pradhan Mantri Poshan Shakti Nirman. This focuses on nutrition, particularly for school children. Its goals are really twofold: improve nutritional levels, but also boost school enrollment and attendance, and reduce dropouts, tackling health and education together.
Makes sense. Health is another dimension, right?
Yes. PMSMA, the Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan, launched in 2016, specifically targets maternal and infant mortality, aiming to provide better antenatal care.
Okay. And one more was mentioned about cooking fuel.
Ah, yes. PMUY, the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. This scheme aims to provide clean cooking fuel, LPG connections, to women from below poverty line, BPL households.
Why is clean cooking fuel important for poverty reduction?
Well, traditional fuels like firewood or dung cakes cause significant indoor air pollution, leading to serious respiratory illnesses, particularly affecting women and children. Shifting to LPG improves health, saves time spent collecting firewood, and is generally safer.
And who does PMUI target specifically?
It targets BPL households, but also specifically mentions scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, forest dwellers, basically the most deprived sections. The sources explicitly state it's not aimed at, say, wealthy urban households.
So these programs together, employment guarantee, nutrition, maternal health, clean fuel, they seem to be hitting different facets of poverty.
Exactly. It shows a conscious effort to address the multidimensional nature of poverty we talked about earlier, beyond just income support.
As we kind of wrap up this deep dive, there's one final concept our sources introduced that feels really important. It's called human poverty.
Yes, human poverty. It's a concept that really broadens the lens one last time.
How does it differ from, say, the MPI or just income poverty?
Well, human poverty pushes us to think beyond even the MPI's indicators, in a way. It encompasses things like lack of access to education, yes, but also inadequate shelter, poor health care, job insecurity. And crucially, lack of self-confidence, lack of freedom from discrimination, lack of basic political freedoms.
So it includes dignity, security, freedom. Things harder to quantify.
Precisely. It's not about lacking luxury goods. It's about lacking fundamental human capabilities and dignity. It reminds us that true well-being isn't just about having enough money or even basic services, but about having the opportunities and freedoms to live a life one values.
That's a powerful way to think about it. Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We started with individual stories like Ram Saran and Laka Singh, highlighting issues like precarious work and landlessness.
Hmm.
Then we saw how measuring poverty evolved in India, from simple calorie counts to the comprehensive multidimensional poverty index.
Right.
We looked at the significant progress made in India, but also the stark regional disparities and the specific vulnerability of groups like scheduled castes and tribes.
And the global context, the shift in poverty concentration towards sub-Saharan Africa, and the ambition of the SDGs.
Exactly. And finally, understanding the roots in colonial history and the ongoing cycle of debt, leading to India's two-pronged strategy of growth, plus targeted programs like MGNRE-GA and PMUY.
It's been quite a journey through these sources.
It really has. We've seen poverty is undeniably complex, deeply interconnected with health, education, social structures, history.
Indeed. And connecting this all back, our deep dive really underlines that tackling poverty effectively requires understanding all these layers, recognizing the historical context, the different ways poverty manifests itself, income, multidimensional, human poverty, and seeing those intricate links between social factors, economic realities, health outcomes.
Mm.
Which perhaps leaves us with a final question for you, our listener. Thinking beyond government policies and big programs, how might our own individual actions, our awareness, maybe even our choices in our communities contribute? How can we help foster environments that reduce that vulnerability we talked about and promote genuine access to these essential human needs, capabilities, and opportunities for everyone?
That's a very powerful thought to end on. Definitely something for all of us to reflect on. Thank you for guiding us through that complex landscape.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.